Welcome back, fifth grade. Today we're going to talk about fraction and whole number division. So you will need paper and pencil. So get ready to go. So we're going to do some problems using a model to help us so that we can visualize what is happening with these division problems. And then we're going to look for some other patterns. So the first problem we're going to do is 1/4 divided by 3. So what I'd like you to do is draw a rectangle. And because we're talking about fourths, we need to make 4 equal parts. And I'm going to draw it this way, and you'll see why in a second. Now, the problem says that we want to um, take 1/4. And so I'm going to highlight 1/4 because really that's the part of the rectangle we care about. Now, we're going to take this 1/4 and we're going to divide it into 3 equal pieces. So I'm going to do the dividing it into 3 equal pieces the opposite direction that I did the 1/4. So I'm going to draw 3 equal parts here, and I'm going to go ahead and draw it all the way across. Now, when we did that, we created a different size part, right? So what is our part size now? Well, they're twelfths. And so if we take that original part that's green and divide it into 3 equal parts, one of those parts would look like that. And that would be 1/12. So if you think about it, 1/4 divided by 3 gives you 1/12 because 1/3 of 1/4 is equal to 12. You know that when we divide by 3, we are finding a third of a number. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start with a division problem, and we're going to convert it into a multiplication problem. The word of indicates that we are multiplying. So I wrote the word of, but I could very easily have just drawn a multiplication sign there. So in this next problem, we're going to divide now a whole number by a fraction. So 9 divided by 1/3. So I drew 9 rectangles. So you might want to pause the video so you can get your 9 rectangles drawn. And then what we're going to do is we're going to show thirds on each of these rectangles because we're counting the number of 1/3 there are. Because another way we could read this problem, we could say how many 1/3 are in 9. So I have 3 equal parts in each of the holes, each of the rectangles, right? So how many 1/3 are there? Well, there's 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. So really we have 27 1/3. And if we wanted to make this a multiplication problem, it's like saying 9 times 3 is equal to 27 because there were 3 1/3 in each of the rectangles. So take a look at these two problems. Kind of similar in that they involve a 2 and a 4, but different. So in this first problem, we're taking a part and dividing it by a whole number. And in the second problem, we're taking a whole number and dividing it by a part. Okay, so let's draw this first problem. And I'm going to draw a rectangle. And it's all we care about is 1/4 of this rectangle. So I'm going to draw 4 equal parts. And I'm going to highlight 1/4. Okay, now we're dividing it into 2 equal parts. So we're going to do that by drawing the 2 equal parts in the opposite direction. Now we created a new number of equal parts in our whole rectangle, and there are 8 of them. And if we divided this 1/4 into 2 equal parts, this is one of those equal parts, so that would be 1/8. Now, how else could we write that? That is the division problem, but a multiplication problem that we just did is we took half of 1/4 and we ended up with 1/8. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a second. Now in the next one we have 4, so 4 rectangles, and we're counting the number of 1/2s there are. So if we draw 2 equal parts on each of those rectangles, then we want to count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 1/2s in 4. And really what we just did is we did 4 times 2 is equal to 8. So now I want you to think about the results we got here. When we started with the fraction apart and we divided it by a whole number, we got a fraction that was less than what we started with, right? And you can see that when you look here, we started with the blue shading, but we ended up with the red, okay? So a part divided into 2 pieces gave us a smaller part. On this problem, we started with a whole number and we divided it by a part and we got a whole number greater than what we started with because we were counting the number of smaller pieces. So that's just going to take some getting used to, because typically we think about division with whole numbers. If you did 12 divided by 3, you end up with something less, right? But sometimes when we do division, we end up with something more depending on what we're dividing by. If the dividend is a fraction, then our quotient is going to be larger. So open your books to page 373 and we will work on these problems together. All right, number 1 has a model and it wants you to solve 2 divided by 1/4 by turning it into a multiplication problem. But let's use the model. So you see that we have 2 rectangles and we want to count the number of 1/4. How many 1/4 does it take to make 2? Well, we can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 of them, and that is the same as 2 times 4. On 1/9 divided by 3, well, first of all, we should read the directions. It says write the related multiplication sentence to solve it. So when we took a part and divided it by a whole number, we end up, well, in this case, 1/9 divided by 3, if you do the drawing, it will give you 1/27. That is the same as 1/3 times 1/9. And if it helps you to draw the model, you should draw the model until you see the pattern. Okay, 7 divided by 1/2. If you counted the number of 1/2s in 7, you would get 14, which is the same as 7 times 2. Okay, all right. What I would like you to do now is to pause the video, do number 4 through 7, and then come back and check your answers. All right, take a look at what I've written and see if it matches what you wrote. Okay, let's move to number 8. It asks you to describe how the model shows that dividing by 2 is the same as finding 1/2 of 1/4. So their shading is a little different than the way I did it. So I would have originally shaded it. We started with 1/4, which is that whole piece. And then you found 1/2 of that, which would be this part. So it is like finding 1/2 of 1/4 to give you 1/8, because we actually shaded half of the 4th. Okay. All right, on number 9, Mrs. Leah has 12 pounds of modeling clay. She divides the clay into 1/2 pound blocks. If Mrs. Leah sets aside 6 of the blocks and gives the rest to students in her art class, how many 1/2 pound blocks of clay does Miss Leah give to her class? Okay, so the question really is, if we start with 12 pounds and she divides them into 1/2 pounds, the problem we're solving there is then 12 divided by 1/2, which is the same as 12 times 2 is 24. So she had 24 1/2 pound blocks. She sets aside 6 of them, which means she's not going to give the class 6 of them. and that leaves 18. So the correct answer would be 18 1/2 pound blocks. Okay, so you guys are going to work on the practice page today, and if you need to go back and look at your notes to see how we did these problems on the video, you should do that to help yourself, okay? All right, good luck.